Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stay Alfred webinars. Before I begin today, just a little bit of housekeeping. We'd love to take your questions throughout the webinar. In order for you to do that, if you would just click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, you can submit your question via text anytime during the presentation, but we will hold questions until the end. We'll be sure to leave enough time to get to all of your questions today. So let me go over the agenda. We're going to start off with just a few minutes spent telling you a little bit about Stay Alfred, what our business model looks like, and how we partner with developers and property managers. And then I'll spend a few minutes talking about the multifamily economic outlook and how our model fits into that picture. Then we'll spend the bulk of our time talking about future-proofing your multifamily asset using this model. Then we have a couple of quick case studies, and then, as I said, at the end we should have plenty of time for Q&A. First, to let you know who's talking, I'm Eric Anderson, VP of Marketing at Stay Alfred, and I'm joined today by Michael Pearson, our Senior Director of Real Estate. Say hi, Michael.
Thanks everyone for joining the webinar today, and I hope you guys find it informative.
So let me start off telling you a little bit about who we are. Stay Alfred is a pioneer of the concept of the travel apartment. Now, if you've never heard of a travel apartment, that's okay. That's why we're the pioneer of the concept. We're part of the fast-growing alternative accommodation space, but we're unique in our sole focus on downtown Class A high-rise buildings in the best downtown neighborhoods. Now, the benefit that we deliver to consumers through that model is to give them the best of both worlds. In the alternative accommodation space, we improve on the model by delivering something with the consistency of a hotel, but also with the space and amenities more associated with an upscale apartment. But we deliver a benefit to our developer partners as well. Because we master lease those Class A downtown apartment buildings, we're able to work with developers to improve their NOI and reduce their absorption time. And what you see on the screen there are just a few examples of the industry organizations we work with. They include organizations like the Urban Land Institute, property management companies like Greystar, commercial developers like Giratana, and real estate investors like 9-4. We're going to talk a little bit more about the master lease further on in the deck, but let me start off by giving you the obligatory Stay Alfred by the numbers here. Our current footprint is about 28 cities across the U.S., and we have expansion plans to grow to about 15 more cities domestically over the next 1 to 2 years. To date, we've hosted over 600,000 guests, and we have under management currently about 2,000 units. We recently closed our Series B funding, bringing us to a total of $60 million raised to date, and we have about 1.5 million square feet under management. I think one important point that's not on this slide for you to know about Stay Alfred is that we've been at this since 2011. And that's important because it means that unlike a lot of other new players in the space, we've really absorbed the learning curve on how to do this best, both from a guest and resident standpoint, and also understanding what our developer and property manager partners really need and how best to serve them. And there's our footprint. As you can see, we're a true coast-to-coast company, but with plenty of room left to grow. As I mentioned, we're in about 28 cities, most recently added Tampa to the roster, and we plan to grow within all of those cities over the next year. So we have a real focus on expanding within our existing footprint, which means we're particularly interested in talking to developers who may have multifamily buildings within that footprint, but are also interested in moving into a few more, as I mentioned. So let me spend a few minutes talking about the economic outlook for multifamily development, something you may be very familiar with, but I want to particularly emphasize how our model fits into that picture. We recently attended a presentation conducted by CoStar, and they looked at some data that you've likely looked at as well around the growth in the direction of the growth for multifamily development, but they presented it in a way that I think really paints a good picture. What you're seeing here is that when we look at the rental amounts for new units currently under construction, we find that in deciling that data set, that there's a lopsided aspect to the way that development is occurring. So nearly all of the multifamily units currently under development are in the top 2 deciles. So they are among the most expensive units available, which places them out of reach for 80% of renters. To give you some more supporting data behind that, that means that 87% of those units require an income of 75,000 or more, and 59% require an income of 100,000 or more. That does not line up with the demographic of most renters today, and the result of that is what you'll see on the next slide. What you see is a widening vacancy gap for upscale apartments. It began in 2012 and continues to this day. And based on some of the softening that we're beginning to see in the space right now, we can project very easily that this vacancy gap will continue to widen into 2019. So what it means simply is that bottom 90%, again, because very few in development, that bottom 90%, the vacancy rate is very, very low, but is increasing at the top of the model. And certainly that creates something of a crisis, can be harmful in the short term for the economic outlook for the space, but it also presents an opportunity, and that's exactly where Stay Alfred fits in. So what our model is designed to do is to take advantage of a countervailing trend in the travel and hospitality space. In the travel and hospitality spaces, you no doubt have heard, because it's all over the news all the time, consumers are increasingly interested in and showing a preference for what is broadly termed alternative accommodation. So that would be an alternative to the kind of classic corporate bland shoebox hotel. So this is represented by the kinds of units that are typically delivered through Airbnb, where we also distribute, but also includes models like our own, which are really about delivering something that is much more consistent than is typically associated with alternative accommodations, but nevertheless fits into that model. So to put some numbers to it, there was a Goldman Sachs survey conducted in 2016 that found that once consumers tried alternative accommodations, their preference for hotels dropped in half, from 79% down to 40%. And this is true of consumers across the board. There's sometimes a notion that only millennials are interested in alternative accommodations, and that is no longer the case. What we see, and certainly what we see within our travelers, the actual sweet spot of the traveler for us is age about 45 to 54, that across the board, consumers are interested in this model. So if you can see the picture in terms of the way that we fit into this outlook, it is because we are precisely interested in master leasing the kinds of units that are becoming most available within this outlook. So that these units that are represented by this top 10%, those are the ones that we seek in developing the master lease model and in offering those units up through mixed use as alternative accommodations, in addition to the residency status of that building. And to read more about it, and we can send this as a follow-up to the webinar, there's a Forbes article that deals with this exact question. 10 years after Airbnb, real estate developers see the money in home sharing. And it's a good picture of how this is starting to take shape in the minds of developers as a way to get highest and best use out of their upscale multifamily asset. But now we're going to talk about future-proofing imperatives, and for that, I'm going to start off turning it over to Michael to walk us through the first of these, eliminating risk and reducing expenses during lease-up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. So, as Eric mentioned, there is a countervailing trend that looks a little bleak for a lot of developers out there and for a lot of projects that are currently in development. Partnering with Stay Alfred and partnering with Stay Alfred with a master lease concept really allows the developer to actually gain control of timing. They're no longer at the whims of what the market is kind of doing. And if we see continued softening within the multifamily space over the next 1 to 2 years, as all those units come on and as there's other potential storm clouds on the economic horizon, this really, this concept of kind of partnering with us and allowing us to offer our short-term rentals through your building really allows you to gain control of the timing and of what the lease up for those new assets would look like. Additionally, we by partnering with us, you really are able to completely remove the marketing expense line from your pro formas. What that means is that's just direct savings. If you partner with us for a full building, it's a complete wipeout of any of those expenses. If you're partnering with us for a significant portion of the building, it's a significant reduction of those expenses, and really gives you a occupancy block as a master tenant to overall reduce the expenses that you have in the building. Next, obviously, this accelerates stabilization. So you can go from stabilization in a building that maybe would have taken you 9 to 12 months in a good cycle. Maybe it looks like it's going to be more like 18 to 24 months in a tougher cycle. With us, you can legitimately have your building fully leased, stabilized within 1 month, which is something that can be incredibly attractive to the performer and really actually generates found cash that the performer doesn't really take into account. And the final point is property management savings. So obviously, partnering with us on a full building means that you may not have a need for a property management company altogether. Or if you do have one, it means you may need them on a much smaller basis, perhaps just doing some vendor management. If we're a major block of the building, we've also seen multiple occasions where developers have carved our units out of the overall cost to what they're paying on. So again, those are great opportunities for you guys to save money on these projects and generate higher returns. So the second imperative, and this works really well, it fits in really well with existing projects as well, is we by partnering with Stay Alfred and by working through our master lease model, you end up with multiple years of your building with guaranteed occupancy. Our master leases really are flexible, and it's a flexible product. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but because it works across all building types in terms of fully leased up, but perhaps having some occupancy problems, brand new properties, or rehab properties, it really is a flexible and useful product for developers to help bridge some of the gap. In working with existing buildings, the fact that if Stay Alfred is leasing the entire building or coming in and leasing a significant portion of the building, even if that's something that maybe grows over time, what it really means is you're completely writing off any of the vacancy lots associated with releasing any of those units. And additionally, Stay Alfred leases come with annual escalation clauses that really allow you to know exactly what your building is going to earn over time. All of that means that you end up with increased NOI.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And I'll take the reins for a minute here to cover future-proofing imperative number 3, because this is one that is near and dear to my heart. And that is the way in which our mixed-use strategy can deliver incremental amenities with zero capital outlay. Now, obviously, the benefit of having better amenities, as you well know, is the churn reduction that comes out of the loyalty that you win with your residents. And of course, you're also reducing churn because you've got Stay Alfred in there on master lease. It's a guaranteed rent every month, but we're also able to get some of that back to you too in delivering those extended amenities. So let me talk for a minute about what those amenities include. One of the things that we're really proud of is what we call the green ticket, named after our signature color. And that is a lifetime 15% discount for all residents in a Stay Alfred mixed-use property on all of our travel apartments coast to coast. So we're really envisioning a future where residents enjoy a combined stay and vacation package that would allow them to travel throughout our travel apartments. And what we're offering today then is that discount. We're also continuously evolving the way that we deliver benefits to our guests, and those same benefits can be extended in a variety of ways directly to the residents. So, for instance, we're piloting in some buildings now grocery delivery for our guests, and we can very easily make that part of the resident experience as well. Other ideas that we're exploring also include laundry service, where we're providing that within a building. And because we do have those house cleaners that are in there keeping up, maintaining those units at a hotel standard, that same set of services can be extended for turnover with your long-term resident units, as well as a cleaning service as a benefit to the guests, to the residents themselves. Another thing that we do is when we're going through our own lease up stage, and we're introducing ourselves to the residents for the first time, we offer what we call our complimentary friends and family stays. So we want people to experience our product, and we want to be good neighbors to folks in the building. And part of the way that we're doing that is to say, we have units available. Kindly extend these to your friends and family for a complimentary stay for graduation or the holidays or anything that that makes sense to be able to have friends and family staying nearby at no cost to either the resident or to the building owner. And then, of course, there's additional revenue that can be recouped through this model because, as I mentioned, you're reducing churn. Also, lower wear and tear on the units because we have to maintain those units to a hotel standard. That means like down to individual scuff marks. We're getting in there between guests and cleaning that up. And so those units are maintained to the highest standards. And you're eliminating the need for guest units, which of course some multifamilies set aside, and you're able to fully monetize those units because they don't have to be set aside. So all these are ways in which we're both being good neighbors to the residents that are in this mixed use model, but we're also producing a model that we believe for our developer partners can be a benefit to the residents over time and lead to the reduced churn. And I mentioned we do a couple case studies, so I'm going to turn it back over to Michael for that.
Yeah. So again, as we kind of mentioned several times at this point, the biggest kind of takeaway I think for anybody to kind of understand is that Stay Alfred really is a flexible model. So whether that's taking a few individual leases in your building, if it's a building that's already near full occupancy and you just need some help kind of getting over that occupancy hump. It's an easy way for us to come into a building, operate within it, be good neighbors, as Eric mentioned, and take up some of that occupancy. Obviously, more is always better. So we're also very comfortable with partial buildings or full buildings. We've done this multiple times across our portfolio. It's something that we have a lot of experience in, providing that anchor tenancy to the developer and to the building, which really helps generate some significant NOI savings. And we have some national partnerships currently, but we're always looking for more. So whether or not you want to fit us into your entire development pipeline, it's a model that really works with those kind of things in mind. So it's something that whatever it is that you need kind of us to do, if you have units that are available, please get in touch and we can figure out how it can work best for both parties. And as Eric mentioned, we do have two good case studies just to illustrate that we have done this and we've done this multiple times. This is actually an interesting one because they are two buildings actually in the exact same city. And it shows really whatever the asset type, whether it's a mid-rise just outside of downtown or a high-rise tower right in the middle of downtown, our concept really does provide NOI benefits to the developer, no matter what the asset type. In 505, it was a almost 300 unit building that's one of the tallest skyscrapers in Nashville. We master leased a majority, 10 floors, while the building was actually still under construction, and those were the first units finished. What that did was, the moment we signed that lease, the developer was able to go and take out his construction loan, because he had already hit an occupancy level that made it attractive for lenders. That generated significant savings for the developer in the fact that he wasn't having to wait 10, 12, 16 months for a lease up, and could simply transition to a permanent, more permanent financing. Additionally, he knows exactly what the lock-in is on this building. So he has a multi-year lease that generate with a market plus escalation clause. He knows exactly what the cash flows from all of those units will be through the entire multi-year lease, which really gives some stability and really was attractive both to him and to his lending partners. Um, I, in this building, we actually offer 24/7 concierge and an on-site cleaning team, as Eric mentioned. So again, providing real benefits to both long-term um, users in the building, as well as making sure that we're being those good neighbors and providing really good customer service to the guests that we have there. Additionally, this is a building that we did do a separate entrance, just showing again that we can do, the model can really be flexible to whatever it is that needs to be done within the building. This, as I mentioned, it allowed him to achieve a 51% lease up within just 2 weeks. And one of the other pluses that really comes with having our units in the building is it really gives an opportunity for people who are maybe on the fence about whether or not that location or that building is the right building for them to maybe sign a long-term lease in. It gives them a great opportunity to stay in the building, to understand the community in the building, to understand the community around the building, and the neighborhood that the buildings are based in. And so not just in this building, but in many of our buildings, we've actually generated long-term leases from people that enjoyed their stays and enjoyed the building and the amenities so much that they wanted to make uh, stay there full time. Those are obviously leases that came with no marketing dollars, and really you were getting paid to have those guests come, those long-term tenants come in and lease in your building. So the other one in Nashville is the James. It's a mid-rise building that we actually master leased the entire building. The building was trying to go through a lease up, which was not going as well as they maybe hoped. And so Alfred was able to come in, immediately master lease the entire building. We phased out the long-term guest tenants that were currently existing in the building, kind of as their leases expired. And what that really did for all parties was immediately the building jumped from below 50% occupancy to 100% occupancy, and it stayed at 100% occupancy through the entire multi-year lease that we signed on the deal, as well as with a market rate escalation. Again, it just created a very understandable, a very consistent cash flow stream that was very easily to predict, which again generated some huge equity for the developer. Here, just to kind of again show the different ways and the amount of flexibility we have. So we actually have a tech-enabled guest experience here, where we're using a smart key locker system called Key Cafe. In addition, we also have a tech platform, again, that's, flexible is kind of the name of the game, that it can bend and flex with kind of any of the different ways that we can use to get into a building. So whether that's smart locks, smart key locks, smart lock boxes, or even working with concierge that may be already existing in the building, we really can kind of bend and flex and deliver a really superior guest experience to our guests, but also fit into the existing infrastructures that are in the building. What this the other pluses that the developer really kind of came away from were the fact that they were actually able to eliminate their property management expenses over time as those those long-term leases expired. And they also developed a partner. So this is a partner that we're discussing multiple other buildings with. And they have a strong understanding of both our business model, a strong trust in our model. Their lenders are very comfortable with us as a master tenant, as an anchor tenant in the building, and it provides some stability and some trust that we're there for the long term, and that we're capable of driving really significant value to all the parties really involved in the development of these buildings.
Great. Thanks very much, Michael. And as you said, we wanted to make sure we had plenty of time here for Q&A, and it looks like we kind of hit the half-an-hour mark just as we'd predicted. So let me check the questions here. And we've got several coming in. And feel free to add questions as well as we're going through the Q&A here. The first of these is very much for Michael here. How does Stay Alfred select developers to work with?
Yeah, so we're really looking for developers across all the country. The biggest thing is, and Eric kind of mentioned, we're really focused on the urban downtown core. So probably any of the top 25, top 50 travel markets in the United States are really targeted markets for us as we continue to grow. The one thing that we're looking for in our projects is for them to be downtown, but that doesn't mean that the developers necessarily need to be. So if you have extensive experience in suburban properties, but are really interested in potentially moving into the downtown core, however, the risks and the extra costs associated with doing so perhaps are a little troubling, Stay Alfred's a great way to kind of dip your toe into that space with either a full or a partial master lease. That gets you into the building and really gets significant equity for you in that project.
Yeah, that's right. And I think actually, as I'm looking at these other questions, this next one is just related to the remarks that you just made, Michael. If a developer wanted to start really small to see how it goes, how would that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, again, as we've mentioned, that we're a very flexible model. So, depending on the regulations, we have a very extensive knowledge of all the markets that we're both targeting, but also operating in. We can move in with just a few units if needed. In some markets, due to regulations, it may require some additional things that we'd have to do with the lease, and we can kind of get into that. Every market is kind of different, but essentially we can start small. You don't have to necessarily turn over a 300 unit building to us. We're always open to those if anybody's out there with those, but at the same time, if you'd like to start with a floor or a part of a floor or 10 units, it's something we can absolutely do. So get in contact with us. We can talk specifics about what the project is that you maybe want to do, and we can kind of really illustrate to you guys both how we can scale this and how we can kind of start and how we can start.
Great. And as I'm looking through here, there are a couple of guest-related questions in here, so I'm going to tackle those. I'm going to take two of them and turn them into a two-parter here. We had one question come in: how do you screen the guests pre-booking to make sure no bad folks? And how are guest issues managed during their stay? So allow me to talk a little bit about the pre-stay and the stay. So on the pre-stay, yeah, our process is fairly stringent. So because we are managing it centrally and virtually, we're using technology to allow us to do this. We're really trying to balance the level of footprint that we have locally with the ability to do this seamlessly using good technology, and that really starts with the booking process. So just as someone would have to do when they're checking into a hotel, they have to present identification. So they present identification to us through a virtual process, but then we follow a two-step public record search and criminal background check process that uses a third-party validation system. And we also ask our guests to agree to terms and conditions. And those terms and conditions are quite strict. They govern the use of the amenities, quiet hours for the building, access to the unit, use of the elevators, use of the common spaces, the care of the unit, all the things that you might imagine you would want a guest in your home to follow in terms of good protocol. And then the question then becomes, okay, that's great. You got your guests to do that. How do you make sure that they're doing that during the stay? In a variety of ways. We're using noise monitoring to ensure that guests are in compliance with the quiet hour requirements. We have a dedicated hotline for residents and building managers. If any guest issues should arise, able to get a hold of us immediately. And we do keep staff locally. So there's a city manager that's available 24/7 if any issues should arise. If there are maintenance issues, we keep maintenance staff, maintenance personnel local that we can call on to go in there and deal with the issues. So even though we maintain a light footprint in terms of our physical presence in the building, we're always available and always there to ensure that the needs of residents and guests are carefully balanced. One of the things that we pioneered that we saw happening in various neighborhoods was the use of a good neighbor agreement. So where we have when we move into a new building, we present through a meet and greet event to the building's residents our good neighbor agreement. That is our pledge that we're going to follow the rules that we set forth for our guests, and that we're going to ensure a seamless experience for the residents. And then, of course, in terms of what that footprint looks like, it depends on the property as well. So, for instance, Michael gave you the example of 505. It's a high-rise building, and we have a large number of units, about 140 units there. And consequently, we're higher staffed there. We have a dedicated lobby. We have someone there in the lobby 24/7, and we provide additional support around staffing for the amenities. That is an example of where our model will scale up or down depending on the needs of the building. And as we're going in and taking on more units, we recognize the need for a slightly larger footprint. But again, always with the need to balance the well-being of the residents. Okay, so we have another question related to the master lease here. So the question is, in regards, actually it's a two-part question, Michael. In regards to the master lease structure, is there any guarantee to the master lease? And then how have lenders typically viewed the master lease from a credit standpoint, and what do you do to mitigate those potential concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, the leases do have some form of guarantee. What that form takes kind of depends specifically on the deal. Again, highlighting the word that we've kind of used quite a bit, it's very flexible. So it kind of flexes to what you guys need it to be. If you guys need significant year over year guarantees, that's something that's potentially on the table. If it's something that's perhaps to get you through a releasing process, if something were to happen to stay out, Alfred, that is those are all on the table. We secure leases with letters of credit or with lease bonds. The lease bond or an surety bond are kind of all exactly the same thing. Bonds sometimes can be kind of a bad word to developers with the experience with construction bonds. Our bonds work much easier and much more simpler than that. Essentially, if for some reason Alfred were to miss its rent, you present the bond and immediately get the rent payment that we were due. The bond is held by a insurance company that's AAA rated, that does literally billions and billions of dollars a year in bonds and other insurance products. So it's a sign that insurance company is very comfortable with the risk, of Stay Alfred potentially going out of business. So we've multiple projects. Regarding how lenders kind of look at those products, it's really something that again is after they kind of understand the concept, understand the history that we have in doing this. There's many lenders who are very, very interested in partnering with us on more projects. We actually have a list of lenders that are very friendly, with the stay Alfred concept that should the need arise next. But generally, lenders are very comfortable with what we're doing. Often we'll potentially need to share some of our financial details specifically with the lender. We're happy to do so. We're happy to kind of partner with you guys in any way that we perhaps need to do that, so that they have a good understanding of kind of who we are and that we're a good corporate customer that is here for the long term. But yeah, it's a concept that once it's kind of explained and once they have a much better understanding of it, there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of comfort level from lenders.
Great, thanks, Michael. And then just one last question here: are the taxes guests pay lower than hotel taxes? Let me address that briefly. No, we simply it's actually quite simple. We simply charge whatever the applicable taxes are based on the rules and regulations for a given municipality. So in some cases that is a simple same lodging tax that you'd pay for a hotel. In other cases it's different based on what the municipality requires. In any case, this is all on Stay Alfred. Payment of taxes and how that works within our model are entirely are entirely on our hands. So that's something that we take on as part of our process. And actually, that allows me to speak to kind of tangentially to something related, even though it's not a topic for this webinar. We've talked in other webinars about the question of the legality, because that is always a question that comes up for us. And certainly our developer partners want to be assured that if we're coming in with the security of a master lease, that security has the backing of being able to operate legally, because of course you do see shifting environment out there in terms of the way that cities are taking on the question of short-term rentals. For us, it's a little bit different because and it's why our model has a great internal cohesion to it, because we are always operating in commercial districts, always and only operating in the commercial districts of cities. And we are always from the start going in with a clear understanding of how to operate in that municipality from a licensing standpoint. We're never guessing at it. We're never going into cities into buildings where we're not able to operate legally from the start. Where we're able, in some cases, that means that we're going in and in addition to being in a commercial zone, we're simply getting a short-term rental permit. In some cases, it's a business permit, and in some cases, it's actually a lodging permit. And in those cases, in those cities where a lodging permit is required in order to operate, we will work with the developer to ensure that the units that we're taking on are able to be licensed to a lodging standard, so that there are no surprises. And that's Michael. Anything else you'd want to say about that aspect of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one point I'd add is and kind of taking it back to the question in general about taxes. So obviously, Stay Alfred is responsible and understands all of those taxing implications. Additionally, if the project does require some different tax codes to be placed on the buildings because of the lease type, and because of how the units are converted, that's something that we have traditionally absorbed any of the delta between those different tax rates. So the developer partner really is getting the benefit of an added flexibility with no additional tax liability in any form. And as a company that, again, has been doing this for 7 years, that is really a truly nationwide spread, we really understand how to operate within each of these different models. So if you have kind of specific questions, because it's difficult to talk about specifics in this kind of matter, because it does vary so much city by city, please get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to kind of walk you through both how this is legal, how this works, and why this kind of makes sense. So again, if you have any questions, if you have buildings in mind or ideas in mind, again, that's a perfect opportunity to get in touch with us.
And you could not have given me a better segue. That's a great note to end on. Wanted to finish by giving you Michael's email address so you can get in touch with us, and we'd love to continue the conversation with you regarding how we can work together. Also note that we will be at the NMHC conference in January, and if you happen to be there, we'd love to start the conversation there. I really appreciate all the robust dialogue. This has been really fun. Thanks for your interest in our webinar and in Stay Alfred.
Thank you very much.